see you guys in the dark.
Have you seen Bob? What about Lisa? I must say that to my cashiers at least 50 times a day. Now, you have to understand that Bob and Lisa are not real people. They're just acronyms, such as Bob stands for bottom of the basket, or Lisa, which means look inside always. Get it? Anyways, it's just something that companies do to make themselves sound cool, I guess. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The weirdest acronym that I've ever seen at a grocery store was DYFEYWLF. I saw it at one of those big name stores about a year ago. It took me a while to figure out what it meant, and I've been doing this for about 15 years. Anyways, I'm Candy, short for Candace. I'm the ACSSM here at Barnaby's. Anyways, it stands for Assistant Customer Service and Sales Manager, which means that I'm in charge of customer service, obviously, as well as all the cashiers, the office people, and any money, checks, WIC vouchers, and food stamp purchases that come through the registers. My friends call me Bubbles because of my happy and chipper disposition. It annoys some people, especially in the morning if they haven't had enough coffee yet. I'm more of an energy drink person myself. Anyways, it's not important. Now I'm sure you all know that Barnaby's is an old store. We don't have one of those cash counting machines, or a change weighing machine like the big name stores do. We have to count all the money by hand, then write it down on a log sheet, and file it away in a large filing cabinet in the office. Another one of my jobs, which I volunteered for, is employee relations. That means try to keep the employee as happy as possible. With all the horrible things that happen here, it's not very easy to do. Anyways, we offer a 10% discount on all the employee purchases, except tobacco and alcohol. We offer free coffee, and have Casual Friday every week, among other things. Most of the employees like wearing their own clothing to work, instead of this boring uniform. However, some customers have complained that all those ugly heavy metal t-shirts that Ricky wears every week. But that is a different story. You can't imagine all of the stupid questions that I get asked by customers. It's ridiculous. Anyways, the best part of my job is planning. Employee Appreciation Day, that is. You see, there's a carnival that comes to town for about a week, every summer, and uses the large field behind the store to set up shop. Pat lets them use the field for free, in exchange for allowing employees and their families to get in for free, and ride all the rides for free, with proper identification, of course. Everyone has a great time. Well, they did, until this past summer. It was mid-June, about 8 months ago. Pat brought in temps from the temp agency to cover the boost in sales that we were getting during this week. I was on call in case something major happened. It was a bright, sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. The carnival had rolled into town a few days earlier, complete with their food stands, kid rides, adult rides, game booths, a petting zoo, and various other carnival rides and animal attractions. This year, they had a huge Ferris wheel. This thing must have been about 400 feet tall. It was monstrous. I've never seen one that big. Anyways, it was about 2 in the afternoon. Everything was going great. People were smiling and laughing, just having a good time. Jim and his family were enjoying a funnel cake under the big oak tree. Marcus and his girlfriend were walking hand in hand down the midway. Stuart, Stephen, and Zeke were standing in line together to ride that pirate ship ride. Pat volunteered himself for that Dunk Your Boss game. He was soaking wet. It was hilarious. Reggie, the town sheriff, still hadn't stepped foot on the property. He was hanging out in his patrol car, eating donut. Milani and her girlfriend were chowing down on some chicken by the merry-go-round. Tommy and his girlfriend were enjoying an ice cream cone together. It looked like that scene from Lady and the Tramp. Ricky and one other regular customer were walking around with headphones, playing air guitar and drums. They looked pretty ridiculous. Ricky had that little chick that he found on a leash. It was waddling behind them. Various other employees were scattered around, enjoying the festivities. There were kids walking around with huge stuffed animals, young lovers holding hands, eating cotton candy, old folks sitting on benches, watching the crowd, while the carnival jingles and animal noises echoed in the background. It was magical. Anyways, I was in the merchandising booth. Pat, being the entrepreneur that he is, decided to have t-shirts, baseball caps, coffee cups, keychains, things of all sorts, printed up and sell them for $5 a shot. They said things like, "Barna, be careful. I survived Barnaby's," and "Barnaby's, shop till you drop." That was our biggest seller. People were buying these things left and right. We could hardly keep up. We did so well with it all that Pat decided to sell them in the store on a regular basis. As I said, everything was going great. Suddenly, all the animals started acting strangely, like they know something was going to happen. All the horses at the pony ride started jumping around and bucking the riders off of their backs. Then they took off, running through the field on a frenzy. One lady's foot got caught in the stirrups and was dragged about 50 yards. She was a bloody mess, but she was okay. The cows all laid down and began mooing wildly. The bulls began snorting like demons ready to strike. All the animals were just going crazy. It was disturbing. Everyone just stopped and stared at the barns. Suddenly we heard what sounded like a sonic boom. You know, the sound that planes make when it breaks the sound barrier. The vibration from the sound was so intense that it shook the ground violently, causing several people to fall onto the ground. Several tents and small buildings collapsed as well, crushing the people inside. Dust and debris was flying everywhere. The carnival workers tried desperately to stop the rides and remove the riders. The on-the-ground rides were somewhat successful, only a few injuries, but the off-the-ground rides weren't so lucky. As the wind blew harder, as I can only describe as the force of a tornado, the pirate ship ride was caught in a full swing and was ripped completely off its base and sent soaring into the sky. Screams of the passengers still haunt me in my sleep. It came crashing down on the ground, crushing and killing all the passengers aboard and injuring many people on the ground. People were running and screaming, heading to their cars or into the store. They were jumping over the injured people and bodies to save themselves. The wind was blowing so hard that it launched several people into the air and slammed into trees, carnival rides, and the back of the store. Lightning bolts began to hit the ground as the thunder roared. It never rained, though, which was odd. I hid behind an old propane tank connected to the building next door. Thank God I wasn't struck by lightning. Now that I think about it, there were no animals injured or killed during all of this. The wind never touched the barns or the petting zoo. All the animals were alive and accounted for, which was odd, but a good thing nonetheless. From my point of view, I could see that the midway was totally demolished. Bodies lay amongst the twisted metal and bloody stuffed animals. The merry-go-round began spinning extremely fast from the wind. It broke free from its axle and launched into the sky, soaring through the air like a frisbee. I heard they found it smashed into an old abandoned house out on Chestnut Street. The Ferris wheel began to sway back and forth. People in the top carriages began climbing down the wheel in an attempt to get to safety, but the attempt was useless. A lightning bolt was struck the base of the Ferris wheel, causing it to break free. The wind then pushed it over, came crashing down on the back of the store. The store had been damaged, and just like that, it was over. The wind stopped, the sky was clear again, the sun came out like nothing ever happened. I crawled out from behind the propane tank, took a look around. The carnage was devastating. I didn't look inside the store. People were bleeding. People were crying. I nearly broke down and cried myself. I pulled myself together and called 911. They said that they already had a few reports of what was going on. Ambulances and EMTs were on their way. I was walking around, helping people up. I noticed something really strange. There was no damage done to any of the surrounding buildings or property. Just Barnaby's. It was like the storm's full intention was to destroy this place. The ambulance and EMTs showed up shortly after and tended to the survivors. The cops showed up, except for Reggie, and taped off the property with yellow tape. The coroner showed up, gathered up all the bodies as well as the pieces, with the snow shovel-looking thing. Then they left. I heard later that the body count was in the hundreds. We lost 7 employees that day, as well as a few temps. After everyone had left, I was walking around, looking at all the damage. when I noticed Pat, down on his knees, staring at the damaged store and crying. That's the first time that I ever saw the man cry. I went to console him when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little Native American boy standing at the edge of the property. I turned to face him. He bent down and tapped the ground 3 times, and then stood up, and then disappeared. I just walked away. Maybe now's not a good time, but I promised that I would tell you what that acronym meant at the beginning of the story. It stands for, Did you find everything that you were looking for? I drove by the store the very next day. I saw Pat out there boarding up the front window. On one of the boards was a sign that read, For Sale by Owner. A wave of emotion came over me. I pulled my car into an abandoned parking lot and just sat there, thinking about everything that has happened at that store. Some were good, some were bad, but it was always eventful. There was definitely never a dull moment. 2 weeks later, I drove by on my way to a job interview. I saw the front window boarded up, but I didn't see the for sale sign. However, I did see another sign on the front grass. It read, Coming soon, Cartwright Cinema. There's nothing in the dark that's not there in the light. That's what I always believed, until I bought that place. I never believed in ghosts, spirits, weird energies, or anything paranormal, but I do now. I'm Catherine Cartwright. I bought the property where a place called Barnaby's, an old grocery store, used to be, until a freak storm hit. I'm originally from Southern California. Friends call me Kitty Cat. Sometimes I make a purring sound when I breathe. It's a medical condition that I've had since I was younger. Anyways, that is not important. I moved here about 8 years ago. I used to work at my father's metal building company, but I've always had an interest in movies. I love movies, any kind of them, action, adventure, comedy, drama, you name it. I always wanted to own my own theater, so I moved out here to pursue that dream, and I did it. Anyways, I now own Cartwright Cinema. We're a small multiplex movie theater company. I own a small theater, a few towns over, and I was thinking of branching out. When I saw that property was up for sale, I thought it would be the perfect location for another theater. And it was the perfect location, but not the perfect property. Part of the agreement I made with Mr. Barnaby when we signed the contract was that if any weird or strange things happened, I would write it down and give it to him. When he asked me to do this, I thought, why not? Nothing's going to happen. That stuff's not real. I was wrong. Let me start from the very beginning. As I said earlier, I was thinking of branching out, so I grabbed my laptop one day and started to search properties for sale throughout the state. I came across that property as a result of a computer glitch. I started to type properties for sale, and before I could even get the word properties typed out, that listing had popped up. It was odd. I never even knew that place existed. The property was in a good location, the middle of town, high traffic area, and had an extremely low price. It was a developer's dream. Yes, the building was damaged, and the grounds were tore up, but since it was an old, all-brick building, it was nothing that a mason and a landscaping team couldn't fix. I called the realtor at the number that was listed in the ad and agreed to pay the asking price without even seeing the place first. Well, besides the pictures in the ad. That was definitely a bad idea. The realtor had called me back a couple of days later, said that the owner has accepted my offer, and asked if it was possible that we all met and signed the contract the very next day. I agreed. Actually, it's called a land contract. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's a contract that is drawn up, usually by a realtor or attorney, sometimes just between the buyer and the seller, that details agreements and conditions for purchasing a certain piece of property. Anyway, the next day it came. We all decided to meet up, at noon, at an old gas station in the next town over. I arrived first and went inside to get an energy drink. The cashier kind of creeped me out a little bit, so I got out of there as fast as I could. The realtor had arrived next, in his shiny new Cadillac Escalade. It must be nice. I'm still rolling around in a '98 Dodge Caravan. He said to call him Pat, but it's a respect issue, so I prefer to call him Mr. Barnaby. Anyways, He came rolling up in an old, bright purple short bus that he converted into his own personal RV. That thing was pretty cool, besides the color. It looked like a big Barney bus. I wonder if his color choice had anything to do with his last name. You know, Barnaby, Barney. He let me check it out after we signed the contract, and said that he was going to do some traveling, just to get away from everything. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have went with him. We discussed the conditions and agreements, made a few changes which included a 48-hour return clause, which meant that I would return the property to Mr. Barnaby within 48 hours of purchase if I chose to do so. It was his idea, because in his words, you have no idea what you're dealing with. I blew it off. We finally agreed on a contract, right there in the middle of the parking lot. The price never changed, though. We both signed the contract on the side of the bus. The realtor witnessed it. I gave him my cashier's check, and he gave me the deed to the property. The deal was done. The realtor had given us a copy of the contract, then got in his car and left. Mr. Barnaby and I talked for a little while. He's a really nice guy. Let me tell you about this bus. Not that it has any relevance to my story, but like I said, this thing was pretty cool. We talked for about half an hour as he explained everything that he has done to it. He has taken out all the seats, put plywood down as a floor, and then put a yellow carpet on top of that. He framed the whole interior with 2x4s, put insulation between the wood, and covered the walls and ceilings with drywall, and painted it mint green. That wouldn't have been my color of choice, but it's his bus. He left the windows and rear exit door exposed. He put a wall behind the driver's seat that went all the way across the bus, and put a house door, painted orange in the middle, leading into the back of the bus. He had red curtains on the windows, a gray futon bed, a long black dresser with a light blue coffee pot, a white microwave, and a little 13-inch brown television set with a VCR hooked to the top of it. A small black refrigerator on the side of that, and a small white potty chair in the corner. It's kind of gross, but whatever works for him. It looks like a box of crayons exploded in there. His power source was a power strip connected to a car battery, connected to the original battery. He said as long as he drove it for about half an hour a day, that would keep both the batteries charged enough to run everything for a while. Anyways, back to the story. After saying our goodbyes and changing cell phone numbers, in a friendly gesture, Mr. Barnaby hopped into his bus and headed south. I jumped in my van, headed north, and made a beeline for my new property. I was excited. I arrived at the address about 20 minutes later, and I must say, the picture in the ad must have been taken right after the storm happened, because it didn't look anything like that picture. It was far worse. The winter months had not been nice to that building. There was some sort of black fuzzy stuff growing on the side of it. The whole entire roof was caved in, as well as the top part of the building. There was no way to fix that place, I thought. I'm going to have to tear this whole place down. Now, for some strange reason, something told me to go inside. I don't know what it was, but I just felt that I had to. That was a decision that I would later regret. I opened up the door, which was still in pristine condition, which was very odd to me. I opened up the door and stepped inside. As soon as I did, it was like I stepped into a time capsule or something. The store was in full operation, fully intacted, and open for business. I stood there in shock. There were people in there shopping, employees everywhere. The roof was back on. The lights were on as well, as 80s top 40 hits played over the radio. It was business as usual. How could that possibly be? I don't know how long I stood there just watching. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, at the entrance to the hallway that led to the bathrooms. I only know this because of the sign hanging from the ceiling that said restrooms with an arrow pointed up. I saw an old Indian medicine man dancing around and chanting. I don't know what he was saying, but he started making a pushing motion with his arms in my direction. After each time he did this, he would slap the front of his thighs, and then did the pushing thing again. I'm starting to freak out at this point. He did this about 3 or 4 times, and then I suddenly began to feel lightheaded, really lightheaded, and eventually passed out. I woke up half submerged in this wretched smell, fungus-infested freezing cold water. I opened my eyes to see 5 Native Americans in a circle staring down at me. It looked like that Straight Outta Compton album cover, except with Indians. Yeah, I'm a huge Ice Cube fan. I have all his albums and seen all of his movies. But I must say, that day was not a good day. I closed my eyes and screamed as loud as I could. I opened my eyes once again, and they were gone. So were all the people, and a beautiful, pristine store. What the hell just happened? What the hell is going on here, I thought. I laid there on the floor, which was covered in about a foot of this nasty, wretched water, staring up at the sky because the roof was no longer there. I sat up to see the interior of the building totally demolished and falling down around me. Light fixtures hanging by their wires off of steel beams. Twisted chunks of metal laying in front of me, being only what I can assume were cash registers. Pieces of wooden shelving floating in the water. Cans and bags of all kinds of different product floating in the water as well. I felt something hit my right thigh. I looked down and saw a hand. I jumped to my feet, screamed like I was losing my mind as I ran out the door soaking wet. 2 boys that looked like they were about 12 or 13 were riding their bikes past the building as I came out screaming. They crashed into each other as they stared at me, running in my soaking wet t-shirt and jeans. I must have really given them quite a show. It was embarrassing. I hopped into my van, called Mr. Barnaby, and told him what happened, and that I was invoking the 48-hour clause. The deal is off. I wanted my money back, and he could keep that place. I swear I could hear the corner of his mouth rising up to form a smile as he nonchalantly said, "Okay, I thought you would." He agreed to meet me at the realtor's office the next day, where I handed him back the deed to the property. He gave me back my check. We shook hands, and I left. I was done with that place. I did honor that agreement about writing down anything weird and strange that happened, because I feel this story should be told. About 2 weeks later, curiosity got the best of me. I decided to make the drive back down there. I wanted to take a selfie with the place that changed my whole attitude about the paranormal. I'm no longer a skeptic. That stuff is real. I drove down there, stood on the sidewalk across the street with my back to the building. I pulled out my cell phone from my pocket, turned on my camera app, reversed the camera app, reversed the camera shot, and took a picture of me with the dilapidated building in the background. I put my phone back in my pocket, hopped in my van, and drove home. After about 2 hours, I finally got the nerve to look at that picture. What I saw terrified me to the point of tears. Yes, it was a picture of me with the building in the background, but on the grass surrounding it were transparent images of Native Americans. They were everywhere. I deleted that picture from my phone. That was about 6 months ago. Today, right before I started writing this, I received a call from Mr. Barnaby. We talk every now and then. He said that someone made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, and that he wanted to invite me to the re-grand opening of Barnaby's happening next week. Who knows? Maybe I will go.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.